It was at David's annual holiday gala in front of his entire firm that his mother raised a glass and introduced his 22-year-old intern as his bride-to-be. "She's a true partner for a man like him, driven, brilliant, and without any baggage," Eleanor declared, her arm slung around Isabella as if she were the daughter she'd always wanted. The entire board of directors, their champagne flutes half raised, just stared, watching this car crash of a family moment happen live. I felt my own strength drain away as David stepped up, not to stop it, but to put his arm around Isabella, nodding as his colleagues, men and women I'd worked alongside for 5 years, started congratulating him. They were actually celebrating my husband's new engagement while I was standing right there, a spectator at my own life's funeral. But as this surreal horror played out, my mind shot backward, replaying the last few months of warning signs I had been too naive to properly interpret. Every single lie, every weird piece of behavior, every single red flag I dismissed, it all snapped into a single, perfectly clear and soul-crushing picture. But before I get into the details, I just want to say thank you for being here and listening to stories about women who stood up for themselves instead of being quietly thrown away. If you agree that commitment matters and that deceit should have a price, I'd really appreciate it if you'd subscribe. Your support helps this message reach others who might need to hear it too. The signals had been appearing since early autumn, quiet at first, but they grew louder with every week that passed. It all began with David's work schedule, which suddenly became unpredictable in ways that made no sense. He'd always been a workaholic, but this was different. It felt personal, secretive. He started claiming he had to stay at the office until 10 or 11 at night for urgent projects, but these projects never showed up on any of the quarterly updates or internal memos I had access to. When I would offer to bring him dinner on those late nights, he'd just wave it off. "The team and I already ordered in," he'd mumble, even though if I called the main office line after hours, the security guard would confirm the floor had been cleared out since 6:30 p.m. The inconsistencies were screaming at me, but I kept telling myself there had to be a logical reason I just wasn't seeing. His personal routines also changed in ways that gave me a constant, low-level hum of anxiety. David started jumping in the shower the second he walked through the door. Even on days he swore he'd been cooped up in an air-conditioned boardroom all day. He began wearing more cologne, a much more expensive one, as if he were trying to cover up a scent that had no place in a corporate setting. He even changed his aftershave, ditching the subtle sandalwood I always got him for Christmas for something sharp and citrusy that made our own bedroom feel like a stranger's apartment. The phone became his shadow, a permanent fixture in his hand that never left his side, not even when we were supposed to be having a quiet moment together. He'd take it into the bathroom with him, place it screen down on the dinner table, and had started sleeping with it tucked under his pillow instead of on the nightstand where it had lived for our entire 5-year marriage. Whenever it buzzed during a movie or a quiet evening, he'd shoot it a glance filled with this strange mix of excitement and guilt that twisted my stomach into knots. Our credit card bills started to tell a narrative I was initially too afraid to fully acknowledge. Charges from high-end restaurants started popping up more and more. Places like the Gilded Spoon, the Orchard, and the Starlight Lounge, all known for their romantic, intimate settings, not for closing business deals. When I'd ask him about the charges, David would weave these intricate stories about entertaining clients or attending mandatory networking functions, but the dates and times never quite lined up. The receipts showed dinners for 2 at 8:30 p.m. on nights. David insisted he was in budget meetings that had officially wrapped up at 5. The restaurants he was frequenting were famous for their lovers' lane tables and wine pairings for 2, not for corporate powwows. I started taking pictures of every statement with my phone before he could get to the mail, building a private collection of proof I wasn't emotionally ready to confront him with. Then came the jewelry purchases, small at first, but when I looked at them all together, they formed a damning trail. A pair of delicate gold hoops from a boutique called Argento, a silver locket from Sterling Co., a set of pearl studs from a place called Heirloom Gems. I searched our house from top to bottom, thinking maybe he was hiding early anniversary or birthday gifts for me, but I found nothing. These beautiful, thoughtful gifts were going to someone else, to the person who was now getting the romantic attention I hadn't received in months. The hotel charges were the final crushing blow, though I tried with all my might to explain them away. The Grand Westwood Hotel kept appearing on the statements, always an executive suite booked for a full weekend during times David claimed he was at some essential business conference. I remember calling the hotel's event manager, pretending I was an assistant trying to coordinate my schedule with his, and they had no record of any corporate events hosted on those weekends. The suites were booked under David's personal name for what was obviously a series of romantic trips with someone who was not his wife. The charges for room service, couples spa packages, and late-night champagne deliveries painted a picture of intimacy so vivid it made me physically sick. Eleanor's sudden, intense interest in our marriage should have been the most obvious warning sign of all. She had never really liked me, but her disapproval was usually something I could manage with polite smiles and keeping my distance. But recently, her meddling became pointed and strategic, like she was part of a coordinated attack on our relationship. She started dropping by our house unannounced when she knew I was at work, spending hours alone with David talking about things they would immediately go silent about the second I walked in. At family dinners, Eleanor would make these grand statements about how modern marriages need to evolve to survive. She'd bring up other couples who made difficult but necessary choices for their happiness, all while staring directly at me. Her comments about my career became more cutting, suggesting that women who worked were prone to losing touch with their natural instincts and family duties. Whenever I tried to talk to David about our own future, a vacation, a home project, even just weekend plans, Eleanor would jump in with some opinion about how young people shouldn't settle for what's comfortable, but should chase their authentic passions. But the most heartbreaking change was how David started treating me. This was the man who once valued my opinion on everything, from what tie he should wear to major career moves. Suddenly, he acted like my thoughts were just background noise. He'd make huge plans without even mentioning them to me, cancel our social engagements without a word, and brush off my concerns about his behavior with condescending phrases like, "You're overthinking it," or "You're being too sensitive." Our physical intimacy became cold and mechanical, as if he were just checking a box on his list of husbandly duties. He'd roll over the second it was done, grabbing for his phone instead of holding me like he used to. Sometimes I'd catch him just staring at the ceiling with this look of deep dissatisfaction, like he was a prisoner in a life he no longer wanted. The final, devastating piece of the puzzle fell into place just 2 weeks before tonight's party. David had left his laptop open on the kitchen counter while he took a shower, and an email thread was open on the screen that completely destroyed what little denial I had left. The messages were from a woman named Isabella Vance, and they were discussing plans to meet up with a level of intimacy that was far beyond any professional relationship. She wrote about how much she missed him during his last business trip to Chicago, mentioning specific details about his hotel room and a dinner they had that proved she was there with him. The emails were full of inside jokes and plans for the future, revealing a relationship that had been going on for months while I was at home, obliviously playing the part of the supportive wife. Now, standing in this ballroom, watching David accept congratulations on his engagement to this Isabella Vance, I finally understood. Every single warning sign had been a step on the path leading to this exact moment of public disgrace. The months of weird behavior, the mystery expenses, the emotional void, it was all part of a long, calculated betrayal. But what I didn't know yet was that Isabella Vance's arrival in our lives was no simple office affair. The real game was far more complex, and the full extent of the deception was about to be revealed in a way I could never have predicted. That Isabella Vance was no ordinary intern was now painfully obvious as I watched David celebrate his new life with her. But to really grasp how she had managed to weave herself so deeply into our lives, I had to rewind to that first day she stepped into our office, the day the ground beneath me started to crumble without my even knowing it. It was a Tuesday morning in early September. I was dropping off some quarterly reports with Linda, David's assistant, when this breathtaking young woman seemed to float through the lobby like she was on a movie set. Her auburn hair was catching the morning light pouring in from the massive windows, and her tailored navy dress was the kind of expensive, perfectly fitted garment that should have been my first sign that this was no typical intern. The entire reception area seemed to hold its breath as she walked by. Men literally stopped talking mid-sentence, their coffee mugs hovering in midair. Even the security guard at the front desk sat up a little straighter, suddenly looking very focused. Isabella moved with a kind of self-assurance that only comes when you know you're the most magnetic person in the room, her heels making a confident, rhythmic click on the marble floor. "Who is that?" Linda whispered, but her voice already held a sense of foreboding, as if she knew this woman was about to change things. Within a minute, David came rushing out of his office, practically glowing with an excitement I hadn't seen in years. His posture was different, shoulders back, a wide smile, and animated energy that immediately made my chest feel tight. "Charlotte!" he called out, his voice booming with an enthusiasm that felt all wrong. "Come and meet our new intern, Isabella Vance." Vance. The name should have triggered something, should have made me think of Robert Vance, our company's majority shareholder. But I was too fixated on the way David's entire personality had shifted in her presence to make the connection. Isabella offered her hand with a smooth, practiced motion, her grip firm and self-assured. "Charlotte, it's such a pleasure," she said. Her voice was warm, but her green eyes were scanning my face with a sharp, analytical intensity that was unsettling. "David has told me so much about you." That comment felt strange. David almost never talked about our personal life with his colleagues. I glanced at him, and I saw a guilty flush spread across his face, the look of a man who'd been caught sharing things he shouldn't have. He had been talking about our marriage with this woman he'd supposedly just met. Isabella just graduated from Wharton, with dual degrees in business and finance, David explained, his hand hovering near the small of her back in a way that felt far too familiar for a first introduction. "She'll be working directly with the executive team on a few special projects." Special projects. In my 15 years in the corporate world, I had never heard of an intern being put on high-level executive work on their first day. Internships were for fetching coffee, making copies, and learning the absolute basics. They didn't come with a direct line to senior management and confidential company strategy. In the days that followed, Isabella's presence was everywhere. Her desk was placed in the executive corridor right next to David's office, giving her a clear view of every important meeting. Her computer setup was more advanced than mine, with dual screens and access to software most employees had to wait years for. The IT department had somehow rushed through her security clearance and system access, bending rules that were usually set in stone. Margaret from accounting was the first one to say what everyone was thinking. We were having our usual Thursday morning coffee when she leaned in. "Something's not right with that new girl," she said, looking around to make sure no one was listening. Yesterday, she asked for the comprehensive budget reports for the last 3 fiscal years. She was asking questions about expense classifications and vendor contracts that sounded more like a forensic audit than an intern trying to learn. I had seen the same thing. During our monthly department meeting, while the other interns were just trying to keep up, Isabella was asking pointed questions about our cost allocation models and revenue recognition policies. Her questions weren't about learning, they were targeted, like she was hunting for something specific. "She's getting access to files that require a department head's sign off," Margaret went on, her voice dropping to a whisper. "But she's getting it. Linda said David personally approved a clearance level for her that took me 3 years to get. The morning coffee run became the most agonizing part of my day. Every single morning at exactly 8:15, David would walk in carrying 2 cups from the fancy cafe across the street, his usual black coffee, and an elaborate concoction that had never been part of his routine before Isabella. It was a vanilla cinnamon latte with oat milk and extra foam, a drink that cost more than my lunch. He would personally deliver it to Isabella's desk, with a level of care and attention he used to save for our anniversary. I'd watch from the copy room as he'd linger at her desk, the two of them laughing at something, their body language screaming flirtation. Isabella would lean in, David would find some reason to touch her arm, and their eye contact was always held just a little too long. The meetings were even worse. David started pulling Isabella into executive-level discussions that had absolutely nothing to do with an internship. She'd be at the conference table with senior partners, offering insights that made it sound like she knew our company's inner workings better than people who'd been there for a decade. During presentations, David would actually turn to her for her opinion, even when it went against the advice of more seasoned team members. "What's your take on this, Isabella?" became his go-to phrase, as if a recent graduate's thoughts held more weight than his entire senior staff. Other executives started giving each other confused looks, clearly wondering why an intern was being treated like a high-level consultant. Janet from HR told me once in passing that David had insisted Isabella be assigned to every single one of his projects. "It's weird," Janet said. "Most managers want interns to rotate. David seems to be hoarding her." The change in David's behavior was embarrassing. He'd light up the second she walked into a room. His voice would get softer when he spoke to her, taking on this protective tone that made my skin crawl. I'd seen that look before. It was the way he used to look at me when we were first dating, when everything I said was fascinating and every smile I gave him was a prize. Other people started to notice the blatant favoritism. I'd hear whispers about David's special intern and speculation about their relationship. The gossip hurt, but it wasn't a surprise. Isabella's meteoric rise and David's obvious obsession with her had created a weird, tense atmosphere in the office. What really got to me was how quickly she learned about our private lives. Through David, she was learning things about my background, my habits, my vulnerabilities, things no colleague should ever know. Her questions, all funneled through my husband, felt like a strategic intelligence-gathering operation. "Isabella was asking about your accounting background," David would say at dinner. "She was impressed you studied finance and wondered if you ever missed it." Another time it was, "Isabella noticed you don't wear a lot of jewelry and asked if that's just your style or if I'm not being romantic enough." Every question showed she was paying an unnerving amount of attention to me, collecting data that felt tactical, not friendly. Through David's foolish cooperation, she learned that I preferred quiet nights in, that I was disappointed we hadn't been able to have children, and that I had lost touch with most of my old friends after we got married. Standing in that ballroom months later, watching Isabella accept cheers for her engagement to my husband, it all made sense. She hadn't shown up as an intern looking for a job. She had arrived with a mission, and I had been too trusting to see that my marriage was just collateral damage in her larger plan. The demolition of my marriage wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a carefully planned implosion. What I saw over the next few weeks was a masterclass in psychological warfare, proving Isabella's real talent wasn't in finance, but in strategic manipulation. Her approach with David was surgical. Every afternoon, like clockwork, at 3:30 p.m., she'd show up at his office door with some documents that, coincidentally, always required his expert opinion. The timing was perfect. It was always during that post-lunch slump when his guard was down, and never when other executives were around to see it. "I'm just struggling with these profit and loss projections," she'd say, her voice pitched with just enough helplessness to make David feel like a hero, while her sharp eyes told me she understood those numbers better than he did. She would lean over his desk to point at something on the page, her expensive perfume filling his office and lingering long after she'd gone. I'd watch these little performances through the glass wall of his office, my stomach in knots, as Isabella put on her daily show. She would tilt her head just so, catching the afternoon sun in her auburn hair, and listen to his explanations with this look of rapt fascination. She took elaborate, unnecessary notes as if every word he said was golden. "David is such a brilliant mentor," she would announce loudly to anyone within earshot as she left his office. "I'm honestly learning more from him in a week than I did in 4 years of business school. He just has a way of making complex things seem so simple." The flattery was constant and targeted, designed to make David feel like a brilliant teacher instead of what he was, a married man being played by a woman young enough to be his daughter. Her questions were always sophisticated, betraying a deep understanding of corporate finance that made her damsel in distress act a complete lie, but David was too drunk on the attention to see it. Her conquest of my mother-in-law, Eleanor, was even more impressive. At that second family dinner, Isabella showed up with a bouquet of white roses, Eleanor's favorite flower, a detail I had never once mentioned at work. She gushed over the floral arrangements and then launched into a detailed conversation about gardening, revealing she'd clearly done her homework on Eleanor's hobbies. "These dahlias are just breathtaking," Isabella said, admiring Eleanor's prized flowers with the air of a true connoisseur. "I've been trying to grow them myself, but I just can't get the soil acidity right. Do you think the pH balance is the key?" Eleanor practically lit up. For the next hour, she lectured on soil composition and fertilization schedules, while Isabella hung on every word like a disciple, at the feet of a guru. I just sat there realizing Isabella had found the fast track to Eleanor's heart, her garden, and her ego. "You must come by this weekend," Eleanor offered, completely won over. "I can show you my greenhouse and give you some bulbs to try." Isabella's acceptance was eager and gracious, and just like that, a bond was formed that completely cut me out. Within weeks, she was a regular at Eleanor's house, helping in the garden while listening to lectures on traditional family values and the importance of finding a partner who valued home life over a career. The coffee break interrogations were where Isabella did her most sophisticated work. She timed her encounters with David perfectly, right after a tense board meeting, just before a big presentation, or during a tough quarter when the numbers were down. Her approach always seemed spontaneous, but it was clearly a system. "You look completely worn out," she'd say with deep compassion, appearing at his desk just as he was rubbing his temples after a rough conference call. "Is everything okay? You've been carrying so much of the weight around here lately." David, feeling unappreciated by me and stressed at work, started confiding in her, telling her things about our marriage that no boss should ever tell an employee. Isabella would listen with this perfect, non-judgmental sympathy, making him feel seen and understood in a way he claimed I no longer did. "Charlotte just doesn't get the pressure of being an executive," he'd complain during these manufactured therapy sessions. "She thinks success just happens. I feel like I'm carrying our whole future on my shoulders, all alone." Isabella's replies were masterpieces of manipulation, validating his feelings while subtly positioning herself as the perfect alternative. "You work so hard for your family," she'd say softly. "It must be so hard when that effort isn't appreciated. You deserve a partner who not only understands your ambition, but shares it." Through these carefully staged chats, Isabella learned all of David's insecurities. He felt trapped. He was worried about being outshone by younger colleagues, and he was desperate for validation. She became everything I supposedly wasn't: young, ambitious, and endlessly appreciative. The expense fraud got bolder as Isabella's influence grew. Romantic dinners were now routinely filed as client entertainment. Weekend trips to luxury hotels were labeled professional development seminars. A $2,000 shopping spree at a designer store was justified as a wardrobe consultation for client-facing presentations. A pair of diamond earrings worth $1,500 was written off as an Employee Recognition Award for a project Isabella had barely touched. A weekend at the Four Seasons was logged as a strategic planning workshop for two, which apparently required 24-hour room service and a couples massage to brainstorm quarterly goals. When the accounting department started flagging these expenses, David would get angry and defensive, lecturing them on the importance of investing in talent and building morale. He justified every fraudulent charge as a necessary part of Isabella's mentorship, completely oblivious to how insane it all sounded. Isabella's promotion from intern to unofficial executive was so gradual that most people didn't realize it was happening until it was already done. Her business card suddenly read, Strategic Development Consultant. She started scheduling her own high-level meetings, using David's name to get appointments with major clients as if she had his power of attorney. Other departments began going to her with questions when David was busy, treating her as if she had decision-making power that had never been officially granted. She started attending industry conferences as our company's representative, handing out business cards that implied she was a senior manager. Her desk was moved from the intern pool to the executive wing, right where she could see into David's office all day. She had systematically made herself David's business partner, all while pretending to be just an eager intern. The whole thing was so bizarre that I started to wonder if David had gotten a secret promotion, until I confirmed with HR that no such change had occurred. By early December, Isabella had woven herself into every corner of our lives. She was Eleanor's gardening buddy, David's indispensable right hand, and the office golden child. Her web of influence covered everything, leaving me completely on the outside. The holidays were coming, and Eleanor was already making over-the-top plans for the company Christmas party. But this year, her excitement felt different, almost feverish. Her calls were more frequent, her planning more obsessive, and she kept talking about special announcements and unforgettable moments. Something big was being planned for that party, and I had a terrible feeling that all of Isabella's careful work was about to culminate in a moment designed to destroy me completely. My dread about the Christmas party was spot on. Eleanor's planning became so obsessive that even her own friends started to get worried. She, who normally outsourced everything to event planners, was now personally inspecting napkin folds and testing the sound system herself. "The lighting has to be just right," she'd say during one of her daily update calls, her voice practically vibrating with nervous energy. "I've ordered extra spotlights for the head table so everyone has a clear view when the important moments happen." Her constant talk of important moments sent a chill down my spine, but she'd just brush me off when I asked what she meant. The guest list became her life's work, edited and re-edited dozens of times. She'd call David at the office to debate which clients and employees deserved to be there, as if she were curating an audience for a Broadway show. I'd watch her spreading seating charts across the dining table like a general planning an invasion. "Isabella needs to be somewhere everyone can see her," she muttered one night, moving place cards around. "She should be between David and Robert Vance so she's part of the main conversation." When I mentioned that interns usually sat with other junior staff, she just waved her hand impatiently. "Isabella is not like other interns. She's earned her place." Her excitement wasn't just holiday cheer, it was the electric thrill of a stage manager about to pull the curtain on her masterpiece. She even practiced her gestures in front of the hallway mirror, rehearsing for her big performance. David's behavior in the weeks leading up to the party became so strange, our house felt like it was rigged with a time bomb. He'd pace the living room, whispering into his phone, his voice dropping to a mumble whenever I walked into the room. He completely lost his appetite. I'd make his favorite dishes, only to watch him push the food around his plate, his eyes staring off into the distance, with a look of pure anxiety mixed with a weird excitement. Sleep became a luxury he couldn't afford. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. to find his side of the bed cold, and I'd eventually find him in his home office, staring at piles of documents. When I'd ask what was wrong, he'd slam his laptop shut and insist everything was fine, even as his hands trembled. His work started to suffer. Colleagues told me he was distracted in meetings and forgetting key details on major projects. The confident, decisive executive was gone, replaced by a man on the verge of a nervous breakdown. "Are you okay?" I asked him one night after he'd stared at his dinner for 20 minutes without taking a bite. "You seem so stressed." "It's just work," he snapped, before immediately apologizing. "Sorry, I'm fine. It's all under control." But the dark circles under his eyes told a different story. Meanwhile, Isabella's confidence swelled to almost unbearable levels. She walked through the office like she'd already won a prize that hadn't been announced yet, her posture radiating smug satisfaction. She'd make vague comments to other employees about exciting changes on the horizon and new developments that will surprise everyone. "I have a very bright future at this company," she'd say to anyone who would listen, with the certainty of someone holding a winning lottery ticket. When people asked what she'd do after her internship, she'd just smile and say her role might be evolving. Her wardrobe also changed dramatically, shifting from professional intern attire to designer dresses and expensive jewelry that screamed executive. She was dressing for a job she didn't have yet, as if the promotion was a done deal. But the worst part was how the atmosphere in the office changed around me. Conversations would die the moment I walked into the break room. Margaret, my coffee buddy, was suddenly always too busy to chat. Janet from HR started avoiding eye contact. People would glance from David to Isabella and then quickly look away, their faces full of a knowledge I didn't share. The whispers followed me down the hallways, a constant reminder that I was the last to know. Some coworkers started treating me with this weird, premature sympathy, their kindness laced with a pity that made me want to scream. The scariest thing was that David seemed completely oblivious. He was so wrapped up in his secret drama that he couldn't see how obvious it had all become. Robert Vance, the company's majority shareholder, started showing up at the office more frequently. His visits felt less social and more like surveillance. He'd watch David and Isabella from a distance, his polite smile never quite reaching his eyes. His questions in meetings became sharper, probing into David's projects with a precision that felt like he was building a case. I once saw him take a picture of a document with his phone during a review meeting, quickly pocketing it when he saw me looking. His attention to Isabella was particularly intense. He'd watch her, listen to her conversations, and ask subtle questions about her background. Whenever our eyes met across a room, he'd give me this small, almost imperceptible nod, as if we were both in on a secret. Neither of us was ready to speak aloud. His presence felt less like a concerned shareholder and more like a detective gathering the last pieces of evidence before an arrest. The hotel was booked, the invitations were out, and the stage was set for whatever psychodrama Eleanor and David had planned. As the party date drew closer, I knew I was no longer just a wife watching her marriage fall apart. I was about to be the main attraction in a public spectacle designed to tear down everything I had ever believed about my life. The public execution I had been dreading finally began. The grand ballroom of the Fairmont Hotel was filled with the usual buzz of the company's annual Christmas party, but I knew I was the guest of honor at my own humiliation. The scene was picture perfect. Crystal chandeliers, gold and burgundy decor, a jazz quartet, yet the air was thick with attention I could almost taste. I arrived by myself. David had claimed he needed to get there early to coordinate things. The lie was so thin now, but I had just nodded. I saw him near the entrance, greeting people with a frantic energy, his smile too wide and his laugh too loud. Isabella made her grand entrance like a movie star on a red carpet. She was wearing a stunning crimson dress that shimmered under the lights, and every head in the room turned as she glided through the crowd. She moved with the poise of someone who knew she was about to be crowned, graciously accepting compliments and champagne. Eleanor had stationed herself near the dessert table, her eyes darting around the room, checking her watch, waiting for all the key players to arrive. When she saw me, her smile was so smug it made my chest ache. "Charlotte," "You look lovely," she said, her tone implying my simple black dress was a disappointment. "I do hope you're ready for an evening of wonderful surprises." The emphasis on surprises was like another twist of the knife. All around us, my colleagues were oblivious, talking about sales targets and vacation plans, completely unaware they were about to be the audience for my life's destruction. Robert Vance arrived at exactly 7:30, his presence commanding immediate respect. I watched him scan the room, his eyes lingering on David and Isabella. When he looked at me, he gave a polite nod, but his expression told me he knew more about tonight's agenda than anyone else. Dinner was deceptively normal. I tried to focus on conversations about budget forecasts, but my eyes kept drifting to the head table where David sat beside Isabella, their heads close together. As dessert was being cleared, the energy in the room shifted. The music stopped, conversations faded, and a hush fell over the crowd. My heart started pounding as Eleanor stood up and walked to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice clear and strong, "tonight I want to take a special moment to recognize my son, David." Polite applause followed. "His leadership has attracted truly remarkable people to our company," she continued, her eyes shifting pointedly to Isabella, "people with fresh energy who propel us toward a brighter future." The room was still calm, expecting a standard corporate speech. "Which is why," Eleanor declared, her voice ringing with triumph, "I am absolutely thrilled to share some wonderful news with all of you tonight." She paused for dramatic effect. "Please join me in congratulating my son David and his brilliant new partner Isabella Vance on their engagement." The silence was deafening. Every face turned to the head table, where Isabella was beaming and David was accepting a hug from the CEO. "She's young, brilliant, ambitious, and free from the complications that can hold a man back," Eleanor added, her words a final public condemnation of me. The betrayal was absolute, performed for everyone we knew, turning my personal pain into public entertainment. But as I watched them, something inside me didn't break. It hardened. The months of lies, of being gaslit, of being made to feel small, it all coalesced into a single point of cold, hard clarity. I was not going to be the silent, weeping victim in their play. I took a deep breath and stepped forward into the center of the room. "Excuse me, everyone," I said, my voice steady and loud, cutting through the awkward whispers. Every head turned to me. David's face went white. Isabella's confident smile faltered. "I think there's been a significant misunderstanding here tonight that I need to clear up," I continued, feeling a surge of power. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you all to meet Isabella Vance properly. Not just any Vance, but Robert Vance's daughter." A collective gasp swept through the room as people's heads swiveled between Isabella and her father, who was watching from the back with a calm, calculated expression. Isabella's mask of triumph finally slipped. "Isabella hasn't been working here as an intern to gain experience or to fall in love with my husband," I announced, my voice gaining strength. "She's been conducting a full-scale investigation into David's financial activities on behalf of the company's largest shareholder." The room erupted in frantic whispers. David looked like he was going to be sick. Eleanor stood frozen, her moment of glory crumbling into dust. For a second, Isabella was motionless. Then she stepped forward, her entire demeanor changing. "Charlotte is absolutely correct," she said, her voice crisp and professional, the seductive intern persona gone completely. "I am Robert Vance's daughter, and for the past several months I have been documenting David's systematic embezzlement of company funds." She reached into her purse and pulled out a thick leather portfolio. "David has been billing personal expenses to the company," she explained with clinical precision, opening the folder to reveal a mountain of evidence. Romantic dinners, weekend getaways, expensive jewelry, all disguised as business costs. The room was dead silent as she dismantled David's career, fact by undeniable fact. As she spoke, Robert Vance made his way to the front of the room. His presence silenced any remaining murmurs. "Thank you, Isabella, for your excellent work," he said, his voice carrying the full weight of his authority. "For months, I've seen financial irregularities that pointed to either gross incompetence or deliberate fraud. Rather than make accusations, I chose to launch a thorough investigation to gather irrefutable proof." He looked directly at David. "My daughter volunteered for this assignment. Her background in forensic accounting made her uniquely qualified. The party had turned into a tribunal, and David was the man in the dock." "David Miller," Robert announced, his voice echoing through the stunned ballroom. "Effective immediately, your employment with this company is terminated, for cause." The words hit like a physical blow. "Your access to all company property is revoked," Robert continued. "Our legal team will be in contact regarding full restitution for the funds you've stolen, and we will be cooperating with a full criminal investigation." The same colleagues who had been congratulating David moments ago now backed away, creating a circle of isolation around him. Eleanor, horrified, finally understood that her grand announcement had just triggered her son's complete and public ruin. The aftermath was brutal and fast. The party dissolved as guests, mortified, scrambled for the exit. The festive music still playing from the speakers was a bizarre soundtrack to the scene of a man's life imploding. David stood alone, abandoned. His attempts to talk to departing colleagues were met with polite but firm brush-offs. "This is all a misunderstanding," he kept insisting, his voice hollow, but no one was listening. Isabella's portfolio had done its work. The evidence was overwhelming. His reputation, built over a decade, was gone in less than 10 minutes. Eleanor had collapsed into a chair, her face in her hands, as she realized the cruel irony of it all. Her attempt to publicly humiliate me had provided the perfect stage for her son's professional execution. Isabella, meanwhile, was all business, packing up her evidence as her father gave her quiet instructions. The woman everyone had dismissed as a pretty face had just demonstrated a level of strategic brilliance that left everyone in awe. I overheard Janet from HR whisper to someone, "The way she held her cover while gathering that evidence, we all completely underestimated her." In the midst of the chaos, I felt a strange mix of emotions. There was the sweet, sharp sting of vindication. Everyone now saw the truth I had been living with for months, but beneath that was a deep sadness for the marriage I thought I had, for the man I once loved, and yet, under it all, was an overwhelming sense of relief. It was like I could finally breathe again. No more second-guessing my own sanity, no more pretending. The exhaustion of upholding a lie that wasn't even mine lifted from my shoulders. The Christmas party that was meant to be David's crowning achievement had become his public hanging. Justice had been served. But as I watched the last of the guests file out, I knew the consequences were just beginning. As the last guests hurried away, Robert Vance approached me in the now quiet hotel lobby. "Charlotte," he said, his voice calm and kind, "I think I owe you an explanation." He led me to a quiet seating area by the fireplace. "I've been tracking David's financial activities for nearly 8 months," he began. "The discrepancies were small at first, but they formed a pattern that screamed fraud. I could have confronted him, but men like David are good at talking their way out of trouble. I needed undeniable proof." The scope of his investigation was staggering. His security team had been monitoring David's computer, tracking his credit cards, and documenting every lie. "We have video of him using the corporate card for personal shopping," Robert said. "We have recordings of him lying in budget meetings. We have everything." He had also been careful to protect me. "My team gathered extensive evidence showing you had no knowledge of his crimes," he assured me. "Your divorce attorney will have everything needed to prove his infidelity, his financial abuse, and his deception. You will be completely shielded from any liability for his debts." He went on to explain Isabella's background. a top Wharton graduate who had spent 2 years in the FBI's white-collar crime unit. This wasn't her first undercover job. Her performance was a masterclass in professionalism. When I realized we needed someone to get close to him, Isabella volunteered, Robert said. She knew it would be unpleasant, but she was determined to stop him from doing more damage. The Christmas party had been the perfect trap. We knew Eleanor would make a scene, Robert admitted. Isabella carefully fed her ego, ensuring she would make a public announcement. Your mother-in-law's desire to humiliate you was the very thing that sealed her son's fate. As his explanation finished, I understood this wasn't just about catching a thief. It was a masterclass in strategic justice, designed to deliver maximum consequences while protecting the innocent. Robert had not only orchestrated David's downfall, but had also built the foundation for my new beginning. Monday morning, I was sitting in the office of Maria Flores, the most formidable divorce attorney in the city. The 2 folders of evidence from Robert sat on her desk. "This is extraordinary," Maria said, her eyes scanning the documents. "Most cases are, he said, she said. You have irrefutable proof of adultery, financial fraud, and criminal activity. He has no negotiating power whatsoever." Filing the papers felt both huge and strangely simple. With each signature, I felt like I was shedding a layer of a life that no longer fit, reclaiming my independence from his chaos. The relief was immediate. That afternoon, Maria got a call from David's lawyer. It was a surrender. They would agree to all our terms. I would keep the house, my retirement funds, and all my personal assets completely insulated from his criminal and financial mess. David would leave with nothing but his clothes and the shame that would follow him forever. The news of his firing and our divorce spread through the business community like wildfire. His reputation was toxic. The life he had traded our marriage for had vanished, leaving him with nothing. The months that followed were a blur of legal finality. The criminal trial began in March. I attended, not as a victim, but as a witness to the end of an era. David, in an ill-fitting suit, looked like a ghost. The prosecutor laid out the evidence. $250,000 in stolen funds, documented with cold, hard facts. When the judge delivered the sentence, 2 years in state prison, 3 years of probation, and full restitution, David's legs buckled. Eleanor sat in the back, a shrunken, gray-haired woman who had lost everything. My divorce was finalized a few weeks later. I walked out of the courthouse and into the spring sunshine, a free woman. Isabella had leveraged her success into a high-powered consulting career, becoming one of the most sought-after corporate investigators in the country. Robert's company had recovered its losses and implemented new, stricter oversight. His decisive leadership became a celebrated case study in corporate integrity. For me, the real victory wasn't the settlement or seeing David get his sentence. It was rediscovering my own strength and trusting my own instincts again. The woman who had been publicly humiliated in that ballroom was gone, replaced by someone wiser and stronger. David thought he was trading up for a more exciting life. Instead, he traded his career, his freedom, and his future for a fleeting affair that cost him everything. I had gained something far more precious, myself. Standing there in the fresh air, I knew this wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of a life built on truth, not lies, and on self-respect, not social performance. My new beginning had finally arrived. If this story of justice and revenge had you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Charlotte revealed Isabella's true identity at that Christmas party, watching David's world crumble in real time. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more powerful stories of women taking back control. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. End of story.